your kind information, this session will be recorded for the future reference. I hope you all are fine with the recording. I would like to extend my thanks to all of you for attending this webinar on behalf of Nestle and Earthworm Foundation. Being a veterinary in this industry, you all are aware that recycled pulp and paper industry is growing rapidly. This industry recycled paper market will going to reach around 42,395 million USD by 2028. We are here to address human rights challenges in recycled pulp and paper sector. Now let me quickly share with you all the agenda of today's webinar. We have 4 sessions. In session 1, Ms. Binny Phillips, Country Manager of India from Earthworm Foundation, will set the context of this webinar for all of us. Further, in session 2, we will be going to know about the global scenario of recycled pulp and paper industry from Michelle Zollinger, Head of Global Sustainable Pulp and Paper Sourcing, Nestle USA. Nestle is also supporting EF in their recycled pulp and paper supply chains for the sustainability and community well-being. In further this session, Mr. Rajesh Gupta, General Manager for Quality Assurance from TCPL, will enlighten us on his views about the industry perspective on human rights challenges in pulp and paper sector. Further, we have Mr. Sudhir Katiyar, Secretary of Center Labor Research and Action with us, who will be sharing with us his views and his NGO perspective on human rights and challenges in his perspective. Then in session 3, we have Mr. Talim Hassan from CTR Papers, who will be sharing with us working in an industry, how it looks like, the human rights challenges. And Ms. Rasika, Assistant Manager sourcing from Assistant Manager from Hak Darshak, will share with us her views on the human rights challenges working under a sustainable space. After this, we will be having a discussion and question answer round where we all can come together and discuss further, followed by a closing remark. So in session 1, now I would like to request Ms. Binny Phillips from Earthworm Foundation to come here and share her views and set the context of this webinar. Ms. Binny, I welcome you.
Thanks, Pritika. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out to come to this webinar. There's a presentation that we've put together from Earthworm to basically lay out the context of the pulp and paper, especially the recovered fiber industry. And besides that, we also want to talk about how the industry is changing with the growing tension on human rights and human rights due diligence in this space. So essentially, we have been working with the support of Nestle in the recycled pulp and paper sector, where we have engaged with converters, we've engaged with factories, where the idea behind this engagement is to bring together the goals of what are the ideal human rights conditions or worker well-being that we can put in place in the supply chain, because it affects us all globally. And in an effort to do that, it is important that we bring the voices from various stakeholders in the supply chain, be it a brand like Nestle, or be it a paper mill, or a converter, like we can see the representation of TCPL, Mr. Rajesh, or simply the civil society and experts, academia, who are engaging in this space to understand how we can bring about um, a sector-wide change towards making this more friendly for the people who are working in this, more accommodating for their needs and also their well-being, and ensuring that their rights are put in place. So with that, I'll share a PPT that we've put together. So what is the Indian paper industry business challenges is what we would like to begin with. Basically, there's been a struggle for availability of raw materials, and all the factories that are located in the country are not so close to the ports or raw material where the raw material source is. Those are some of the challenges, besides the fact that a paper mill use is one of those high energy consumption factories, which again is a challenge, which ends up making the end product a lot more expensive when compared to international markets. Another challenge in this sector is labor supply, transportation, and lack of capital and water supply, because this industry uses quite a bit of water for recycling the paper. Now, where does the source of paper or pulp and paper come from in India? 40% of it comes from um, wood, and 30% of it comes from agri waste, and the other 30% of it comes from recovered fiber or recycled pulp and paper. And this is the bit that we are focusing on in this webinar, the 30% that we are at this point sourcing recovered fiber from. So, what's the journey of recycled paper in India since 2018? Why 2018 is because there have been global shifts in the market when China decided that they no longer want to import waste paper, and which opened up the doors for India to import this. And especially with the challenges that you saw in the market, where there is already a shortage in availability of raw material, this was a welcome move for us. So in the year 2018, in the first half itself, we saw an unprecedented growth in the imports of recycled paper, 133% growth. And just from European Union, 200% rise in the export of waste paper to India. But with this increase of India's appetite for waste paper comes challenges like a lot of the loads were contaminated, and which ended up us getting into a space of regulations, and then the regulations where only 1% contamination per load is allowed led to certain other changes. But all of this are multiple challenges that the sector is struggling with, but exasperated by the fact that we were going to face a global pandemic, which shuts down a lot of access to raw material that had just recently opened up for the Indian market. Now, these are the realities that we're working with in this sector. And however, what the positive spin to this is that the influx of waste paper imports from abroad has helped an industry in India that until 2018 was in serious decline due to the scarcity and cost of waste paper to recycle. So today, here at 2022, we are at a space where India is the largest importer of waste paper in the world. And here's a map of where primarily all the factories in the country are located. Um, about 861 paper mills are existing on paper, which are documented, and about 526 of them are operational at the moment. India's per capita consumption as compared to an industrialized country like the United States is minuscule. 2 kilograms is what India consumes per capita, while the same is 200 kgs for an industrialized country like the United States. Here's a graph that will give us a sense of where, like, who is in the world the largest consumer of pulp and paper, which number one ranking in the United States. And the recovered fiber, the recycled paper, who is exported to India is number one, taking in all the exports of scrap fiber at this stage in 2021, 2022. This used to be different with before 2018 when China was the lead player. But due to the ban, now China has dropped down here and India has become number one, which is fantastic as an industry growth because it creates new jobs. It also creates a, a industry that was struggling also gets a new push of a wave, revival, which is fantastic for the industry. But it's not an ideal situation. There are still multiple issues within the supply chain, because of which we're here to talk about what those issues are. And our focus is primarily on human rights. So, where does all the recovered fiber primarily go to? It's in the packaging material. So, when we look at the corrugated cardboard boxes, they are primarily made of waste paper. And that market is growing, as you can see, exponentially. So, this industry here is here and it's here to stay. And therefore, we need at this early stage to have a conversation around how can we make this industry more sustainable, not just for the environment, but also for the people who constitute this, especially the workers, because they have the maximum number of footprint in this industry and the least amount of sale. Here are some of the issues in the pulp and paper supply chain, which we as Earthworm have worked closely with some factories and have had a chance to look at these issues at close quarters. And Pritika, who has been involved in this project at length, can shed some light on this. But as you can see, some of the key issues are informal workforce, basic health and safety, poor working conditions, wages and benefits. So, if Pritika, you could jump in and shed some light on what has been our understanding from engaging in this space in the last year, would be great.
Thank you, Vinny. So during the involvement in the industry for these kind of visits where we see the workers' well-being, we notice some main issues which are related to informal workforce, where we notice the women workers, child labor, undocumented workers, and contractual workforce at a very high level. In terms of basic health and safety, we notice that there are lack of drinking clean water, cleanliness in the toilets, lack of cleanliness under dormitories. There is no availability of PPE kits, lack of trainings prior to use any machines, as also the non-availability of first aid boxes, which is a major issue in the basic health and safety of workers. Then there we noticed also very poor working conditions for workers, which cause the health hazards, which are like lack of fire safety measures. There is no lockers for the workers. Lunch areas are not available. If they are there, then there's cleanliness issues, lack of grievance mechanisms. Also, there is very low awareness among the industry in workers, especially about the wages and their benefits. Like the wages are very low, payments issues are not based on the muster rolls or attendance sheets. There is main issue of cash payments where worker only receive the cash and they don't know about the calculations behind this. Also, the overpayment, overtime payments are not available over there. Low awareness about the benefits in workforce we notice, like there is very low awareness of EPF bonus. So these are the major issues which we identified during the visits in factories related to workers' well-being. So Bini, maybe you can proceed further. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pritika. And the picture that you see here is from a factory that we have visited, where we saw women workers who none of them were documented, and some of them also spoke to us that we've been working in the factory for 13 years. And there were, toilets available for women, and the one toilet that was available for women in the factory was had a padlock on it. And while there is claims that no child labor is used at the factory floor, our observations tell otherwise. So, I mean, these are some of the issues that we have seen and witnessed ourselves, and some of the issues that are talked about generally in the sector. Now, what is the global regulatory landscape around human rights due diligence when we look at it? Here's the map of the world, and here's what all the countries are doing to make sure that their supply chain due diligence around human rights is uh, fully foolproof. So as you can see, some bits are green, some are all yellow, and some are pink. A lot of the countries are adopting laws around this. For example, in China, the Uyghur population, a lot of them used in the factories, the community without the Muslim community that is called the Uyghur Muslim communities of China did not have any basic rights, and now certain uh, laws are in place to ensure that the global supply chains do not engage in those areas, trying to put pressure on the businesses to be more aware of what are the working conditions of the people at the factories from which we're sourcing the raw material. The same holds for certain bills like the Canadian Forced Labor Bill, where and there's some are just policy statements and public discussions, but all of them are creating a general consensus globally that we need to put the human rights or the risks involved in the social risks involved in our supply chain at the same level as the risks involved in terms of environment in our supply chains, which is good in the sense that it is definitely going to push us all in the right direction, and certain guidelines like this is going to ensure that all the way to the bottom of the supply chain, this can probably penetrate, but it will take time. We are at an early stage. Um, Finally, just some anecdotes on what are the health issues that workers in the mill suffer from. Some of them, because there is heavy use of chemical in these factories, when workers do not use a PPE kit or take adequate precaution, they can be exposed to various chemicals which can lead to lung cancer, skin problem, respiratory diseases, etc. Therefore, like once again, why we are here to talk about this. With that, I'll close the presentation, and this hopefully sets a context to the kind of work we're here to do, and it is certainly a challenging space to be in, but also a space that needs all of our attention. So over to you, Pritika. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny, for such insightful session. I think definitely it set the context for all of us. So now moving further, I would like to request as Mr. Rajesh Gupta is there, but before him, he due to some technical glitch, he just joined. So before Mr. Rajesh Gupta, I would like to request Mr. Sudhir Katiyar from Kerala to share his views, his NGO perspective on his experiences on human rights challenges in the sector or the perspective working in an industry or in NGO. Mr. Sudhir Katiyar, I welcome you on the platform.
Okay. Thank you, Pritika. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thanks once again. So my name is Sudhir Katiyar, and I work with the Center for Labor Research and Action. We are based in Gujarat, and we work in a number of states of India: Rajasthan, Maharashtra, MP, Telangana. Basically, on issues of rights of workers, on workers in the informal sector. And our primary objective is to organize the workers into trade unions, because we believe that unless workers are organized, they cannot access their rights. We also undertake a lot of research and documentation work, because before we start organizing workers, you have to know about them, where they are coming from, and because most of the workers we work with are in the informal sector, so there's no existing database on them. There are no existing reports. That is the basically hallmark of informality. There is no record keeping. So we first document them, research them, and of course we also undertake advocacy with the government wherever it is required. I'll be briefly sharing the. We don't work in the paper and pulp industry. That I told Pritika in the very beginning, but she said that still we can share our experiences. And of course, the work conditions are also very similar across many most of the industry. So I'd be sharing in brief, because we work across a number of sectors, mostly labor-intensive sectors where manual workers are predominant, like agriculture, construction, brick kilns. Also, some factory workers, especially in the cotton supply chain, cotton ginning, somewhat spinning also. But we undertake research across the whole range of other sectors also. So I'd be sharing some general understanding about the informal sector, and that is very similar to what I've forgotten the name, but what my colleague from Axfam shared just now. What are the conditions of work in the informal sector? So that is like across the sectors. Yeah. So as saying that, I'd be sharing about work conditions in general, and then I'd be talking about a specific supply chain which we have studied in some detail and which we also worked in. So, in terms, if we talk about the work condition in the informal sector, as I said, it is very similar to what shared just some time back. Wages are very low. In the first place, the minimum wages themselves are pegged at very low levels. And I'll give you a very very quick illustration. Some time back, there was talk about having a universal national level minimum wage. Some time back, around 2 3 years back, and the committee was set up, and it came up with a headed by the National Labour Institute, weekly National Labour Institute, and they came up with a minimum wage of around 374, and the government did not accept it. And in fact, and now what they have accepted is 176 as a minimum wage, national minimum wage, which is really very, I would say, absurd. But that is but in some cases, yes, minimum wages are paid at higher levels as well. But then minimum wages do not get paid as well in many sectors across the industry. Then work conditions again are very bad. Work hours are low, unsafe work conditions, lots of accidents happening. Occupational health is a very big issue. Diseases like silicosis, which are like extant in many developed countries, and we have a whole sectors which are like where silicosis is rampant, and work is continuing. It's not that it is stopped. Then again, social security is just not there. There's no concept of social security in the informal sector. Some workers might have PF and ESI, which are like the basic social security in India. But again, overall coverage is very low. Uh, then the other one, the mode of recruitment. Now, that is also very important because now we have labor shortages emerging. We have skewed development. Parts of the country are developed, south and west, and parts are not so well developed, north and east. So we have huge amounts of migration, workers migrating from north and east to south and west. And the migration takes place under very unsafe, the mode of recruitment is very unsafe. You have conditions that represent bonded labor and which can also be clubbed under human trafficking. We get lots of cases every year where we have to rescue workers from bondage, brick kilns, and not only brick kilns, many other streams now also know, like sugarcane harvesting. We get a lot of cases like that. We recently had a case of workers being bonded in Tamil Nadu in poultry farms. Child labor again is quite child labor. I would say is reducing in some of the sectors. It's not as rampant as it was earlier, but it's still there. And then we also have adolescent labor, which is permitted by law, except in hazardous occupations. And the list of hazardous occupations is very small. That is another major critique. And the civil society is saying that we must completely ban adolescent labor as well. There's large scale flouting of labor laws, and workers are completely unorganized. And then the other second last point is the seasonal migration. That I said I talked about it earlier also. It is emerging as the main mode of labor deployment in many sectors, like in construction. Everywhere you go, you'll find that seasonal migrant workers are the main workforce. And it is of course emerging because of the skewed development, and some parts being developed, some underdeveloped. But it's also come up because the workers, the employers, they don't want to employ local workers, even if they are available. They have a preference for migrant workers because migrant workers can be exploited more, and they don't have any support in the restriction areas. And once we have migrant workers, we also have the issue of living conditions. That workers live under very poor work conditions. So this is about the general work conditions. Now I'll just illustrate the issue that I've raised with the specific supply chain, which is the cotton spinning industry, which is part of the cotton supply chain, which is a very huge industry. And it's also an export-led industry where there's a lot of exports also happening. And generally speaking, conditions in the supply chains that have an export end would be better because we have the trend now where the especially the exports that are happening in the west, which was shown in the map also. We have the situation now that the buyers are starting to monitor the work conditions in the supply chain. It's a big issue. So while we have labor laws of our own in the country, unfortunately they got implemented. They don't get implemented. It's only when the buyers themselves come and monitor, then we have somewhat better conditions. So spinning is an industry like that, which has a significant export component. Now we recently have done some work also in the spinning industry, and I'll just briefly go through the historical development and the current conditions. And textile, is a very old industry. It's probably the oldest industry in the country. And textile industries were set up as long back as in the 19th century. And we had major clusters of textile in Bombay, in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and also in Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, where the magic study that I'm presenting. Then the late 80s and early 90s saw major upheavals in the industry, where the industry almost broke up. It got sick, and the postages got separated. Earlier we had composite mills, and then the spinning, weaving, dyeing, printing, everything moved out, and there were different units set up to undertake different types of work. That is the condition right now. And also, a lot of the work moved to very decentralized units. For example, weaving now. Most of the weaving is being done by power looms, which are completely unregulated. So there's huge amounts of huge scale of power loom industry coming up. Same thing happened in Tamil Nadu as well. Old mills closed, new were opened with new workforce. Now in Tamil Nadu, what happened was that the employers, the capital, it started employing because earlier the workforce was organized. Those factories were closed and new ones were opened. So did not employ the old workers, which are highly organized. Instead, they chose to employ migrant workers from South Tamil Nadu, and they got adolescent female workers to work in the mills under fixed term contracts, staying at the mill itself. And it came to be known as Sumangli scheme. The female worker would come, stay, unmarried adolescent girls would come and stay, work in the mill for 3 years, and then they would leave. They would get married, and they would have. It was like a scheme to collect your dowry, something like that. So it was called a Sumangli scheme, and it got a lot of adverse press. The civil society came upon it very strong, hardly hard, and because it was also an export-led industry, so there are a lot of news articles about it, a lot of adverse media publicity around it. Then the government got into action. It passed certain regulations. Tamil Nadu is anyway, we will know there is better regulated state in the rest of the country. So the society got into action. The high salary for apprentices, they framed rules for hostel accommodation. And then what also has started happening is that industry has now started shifting from interested migrant workers to interested migrant workers from East and North India. Yeah. So this is the current situation now. That earlier there were a lot of reports about child labor in the spinning industry. Now there's no child labor as such. Child labor, again, when I say child labor, I mean labor below 14 years of age. Adolescent labor is allowed to be employed in the industry, even though there's a lot of comments from civil society and other people also saying that they should not be working in the factories. But right now it is allowed, and there is significant presence of adolescent labor in Tamil Nadu spinning industry still now. Majority of the workers do get benefits of PF, ESI, leave, toilet, canteen, etc. because it is export-led and because it is heavily monitored. And the buyers, they send their own audits, there are a number of social audits happening. So that is why it is in a somewhat better shape than the now normal industry, I would say. As I said, that high proportion of interstate female workers stay in hostels, and now they get easily getting replaced with interstate migrant workers from east and north. As Tamil Nadu itself develops and women start going to higher education, there's a shortage of labor emerging. So they're beginning to hire workers from north and east India, interstate migrant workers. Unions are almost completely non-existent. Wages are very low, as I said, around 250 to 80 to 450 per day, which I would say is not a very high wage in an industry setting. And very surprisingly, there's no minimum wage in the industry because of a whole history of labor legislation and all. Normally, every industry would have a minimum wage. For spinning, there's no minimum wage. So that is the situation at present in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhir Katyar. This was great to learn from your experiences, especially the case study from the textile sector. And we've heard a lot about the Sumangali scheme and the fact that there is so much spotlight on the textile industry and how it has affected the workers' well-being in a positive direction is something that is a positive story for us, definitely. So with that, I'd like to invite Michelle, who is going to talk about the project Nestle is undertaking. It's a global project, India being one of the countries where it's being implemented in. It'd be great to hear her insights on having implemented this project across the globe.
Great. My name is Michelle Zollinger. It's really great to be with you today and talk about this very important topic. I'm the Global Responsible Sourcing Lead for Pulp and Paper. So my role or day-to-day is helping and figuring out with Nestle, how do we ensure that the suppliers that we source paper from do this aligned with our responsible sourcing guidance, and also that we can engage wherever we see high risks, engage on the ground to address some of these topics that come up, such as we just heard from Earthworm and the team. Next slide, thank you. So on implementing this with our suppliers in the supply chain, and Earthworm has been one of the main implementation partners for that type of work. In 2021, we've also released our Nestle Human Rights Framework and Roadmap. So a deep dive into how do we think about human rights and issue areas that are coming up globally, and now kind of implementing this in more detail over the coming years. And then also in 2021, we've published our Forest Positive strategy that is really based on or building on the commitment of moving towards no deforestation in our supply chain, and going beyond that to not just achieving that goal, but also helping ensuring that the future of Nestle's role is to have an active participation in restoring forests where they are at threat. So this comes up because overall in our global supply chain, we have two elements of sourcing happening. We have our virgin fiber supply chain that comes into pulp and paper. And then we also have our recovered fiber supply chain. And as I just mentioned, we have a lot of focus over the past years to reach our no deforestation target. We're now invested in also the Forest Positive strategy and moving that forward. And recovered fiber and kind of thinking about how much recovered fiber is really represented in our sourcing globally has been a key part of that, because recovered fiber is one way to release kind of the stress on that demand for packaging. And you can see ultimately from our traceability work, it really illustrates it's actually more than half, so 60% of our total volumes in packaging that is originated on recovered fiber. So this is a really high percentage. It's linked to our overall strategic directions, and also helping figuring out how can we design packaging efficiency and reduce pressures on forest via our products. So while this is great information and efforts and kind of status where we are today, as you've heard, when we look into the recovered fiber supply chain, there are actually a lot of topics that come up around human rights. And so we can't just think about having and replacing everything with recovered fiber. We need to look into these topics, and especially in countries like India, as we just heard, there are many of these complex challenges that are still around or continuing to be around, and is a key aspect for companies like Nestle to tackle, to work with the partners on how we can engage our suppliers to address these pieces. There's also a little European flag here because as you've just heard from Pratika, there's increasing legislation on how we assess and address these type of risks in our supply chain. So overall, there will be continuously being a strong tendency in getting to manage these type of risks effectively for companies like Nestle in the future as well. And so already thinking, how do we engage the sector in this effort that Earthworm has launched today is going to be key. So just a quick illustration of India and the part India plays within our overall picture. So Nestle, as you see here, it's a critical piece of our recovered fiber volumes. And within that, you will see here, there are quite significant social risk present. Over half of it, so about 58% of it, are either high risks unknown risks or they're medium risks that need to be addressed. And so India overall as a country and as a sourcing origin for recovered fiber becomes a really high priority for us to look into and to engage our suppliers in that space with. Yeah, the goal obviously overall will be to be able to see how we can work with our suppliers to improve practices and businesses so they can become aligned also with our responsible sourcing standard. We do have other projects happening on recovered fiber. So we're working on a project in Mexico, in Brazil, thinking about engaging cooperative and franchise models in Malaysia, around supplier prioritization and workforce rights in Indonesia, and currently understanding the overall situation of recovered fiber a bit better, and then in India as well, working really more actively with existing suppliers on supplier action plans and thinking about how do we develop this sector-wide approach that would allow us to influence also at a more systemic level this work that needs to get done. Then if you go to the next slide, thank you. So a few of the lessons learned from all of this work has been, as I had mentioned at the start, recovered fiber is and continues to be a significant component of our overall packaging footprint, but also other fast-moving companies' overall packaging footprint. There are significant human rights issues in recovered fiber supply chains in globally, but also and specifically in India. We've also had the experience that it's very hard and suppliers can be reluctant to share traceability information on raw material origins. And so that's kind of the first step that is key for us to be able to then engage and work and understand who is actually part of our supply chain. In India, challenges or conditions overall are challenges because of different macroeconomic aspects, as Pratik had shared. However, this should not stop us of working in the space and even actually oblige us to improve practices and really work with the people to make our products in that space also aligned with human rights overall and our commitment to that as an organization. There are the overall work and contract with producers needs to happen face-to-face. So a lot of this work is informal, happens in the location. So that was another learning from a lot of our projects. And then also figuring out how can we engage and leverage more brands that are part of this initiative to really scale some of these punctual projects on the ground. So we've been having a few interactions with other brands, but overall are very interested, obviously, to find also ways how do we combine and leverage and collaborate to engage our suppliers in this space in India also very specifically. How do we do that so we can scale up and drive positive change in the sector? There's a few actions that came up immediately as priorities. The first one is about traceability and receiving increased visibility into the recovered fiber sector and the sourcing that is happening there. And so teaming up and leveraging how can we request or ask for this type of information from our suppliers so that we understand even the basics of the origin where things are coming from within the country and within the different suppliers that are providing these volumes to us. The second action is about building capacity through partnerships with brands and suppliers where these risks are high. So if we do have risks linked to specific suppliers, how can we push more collectively to have these type of risks or challenges solved that we just heard multiple ones being talked about. And then the third action is seeing, are there efforts that we can learn from past or other projects that we had in other regions. We had one project in Brazil that we could see how do we learn some of these solutions or innovative solutions we're trying there in that context to another country, another region, and be able to scale and kind of leverage learnings and benefit and impact overall. I think that is all I had today to share. Let me see if there was one more slide. But I hope that gives you a good overview of why this topic is this critical to us, why it's really great to be part of this call today and be able to share with you the overall context and motivation of a company like Nestle in this space. Thank you. Back to you, Pradika.
Thank you, Michelle. It was really understanding to know your perspective regarding this Nestle's initiatives for no deforestation policies, community well-being, and the lesson learned are really great to move forward and call of action and support. So thank you very much. It will be really useful for me and all of us. So next, moving ahead, I would like to request Mr. Talim, if you can share your views on the industry perspective and human rights challenges. I would like to invite you to share your perspective. Mr. Talim Hassan from
Hello.
CETA Papers.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Mr. Talim, you are
Yeah.
audible.
Hi, my name is Talim Hassan Shan, and I've been working as a paper maker for the last, more than 5 years. I did masters in pulp and paper technology from Forest Research Institute, Dehradun, and I have worked with, in 5 years I've worked with three paper mills, including Ballarpur Industries Limited, and then after that I did work in KRPL. It's in Saharanpur. It's a small, not that big paper plant. And after that I joined Setia Paper. It's in Punjab. So I'll simply talk about my experience in the last few years. So when we talk about this human right thing, it's, the industry is, kind of little gray. I mean, it's semi formal. So like you can gauge the situation from situation of the working condition from my situation. Like right now I am going to plant. I was supposed to go join the duty at 10 in the night, but I have to, get to work because there is some issue with the plant, and there's some breakdown. So like we have to be available all the time. The plant runs 24/7. So we need a large number of, the workers from, the migrant workers and all. So the situation is not that good, and that's it. That's what I'm I would like to share.
Thank you, Mr. Talim, for your presence and sharing that this is a very gray industry, and the human right perspective is a very gray in the industry sector. Yes, we all are agree on that, and we are having some good discussions regarding this also. So thank you very much for your presence over here. Now, I would like to request Ms. Rasika to join the forum. Ms. Rasika Kawai from Hagdarshak to share her perspective from an NGO side working under a sustainable space and share with us her perspective on human rights challenges. Ms.
Hi,
Rasika.
thanks, Pritika. Am I audible?
Yes, very well. You're audible.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rasika, and I'm a part of the partnerships team at Haktarshak. We are a for-profit social enterprise. It's really interesting to hear about this industry. I was not, I didn't know so much about the industry. It was interesting to hear the context that Benny set and the about the initiatives that Nestle is taking that Michelle mentioned. So it's been a very interesting discussion so far. So I will talk about our experience as an organization. I've been with Hakdarshak for the last 4 years now, and we've seen all sorts of informal workers and all sorts of marginalized sections of the society. Uh, so let's talk about the challenges that informal workers face overall. I know that this is a session very specific to this industry, but I'm sure that the challenges are, similar across. So, what are the major challenges that they face? I think one of the biggest problems that we face with informal workers is a lot of them are migratory. They do not work in the same place that they belong to, which brings us to the challenge of documentation. A lot of them lack basic documentation, which then hampers them from accessing whatever government entitlements are there, because they don't have any formal proof that they belong to a certain community, or they belong to a certain place, and hence they should get certain rights. Uh, Secondly, a lot of health issues are faced by informal workers, especially in the working conditions that they see nowadays. Talim, I think, gave us a glimpse of what it is like to be working in this industry. So there are a lot of health problems, and a lot of these workers end up spending out of pocket because they are not aware that there are other facilities for them which will help them with their health issues. Then there are most of the people, 95% of the workers that we have interacted with, are not aware that there are life insurances, etc., that they can access for as low as rupees 20 annually, which is provided by the government of India. So the point I'm trying to make is that all these challenges, while they exist, the government of India spends around rupees 11 lakh crore annually, uh, trying to cover all these thematic areas, and uh, it floats about 1,000 welfare programs, spending that kind of amount on all these thematic areas. But the challenge comes where most of the workers are not aware that there are such government schemes. If they are aware, they lack the documentation. If they have the documentation, they don't know where to go, which officer to approach, what government authority to go to. And a lot of them think that it's, we better stay out of all of this, and let's just get whatever we are getting by working our daily wages, etc. They don't want to go into that. So at Hakdarshak, we are trying to solve exactly this problem, which is right from identifying these informal workers to ensuring that they are aware about their rights, telling them that these are the various schemes that they are eligible for and that they can benefit from them, and ensuring that there is that end to end support where till they don't receive the scheme benefit, we don't leave their hands. So entire hand holding support. So I think this is one challenge that I wanted to speak about, the lack of awareness of welfare schemes, and uh, the easy solution that the government of India itself provides, but we are unable to access. So thank you. I'd be happy to take any further questions in our session, and happy to throw any more light that anyone needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rasika. It was indeed very enlightened for us to understand the challenges of workers, and how you are creating the initiatives for workers, creating a platform and taking such efforts. So thank you for this session. Now I would like to request Mr. Rajesh Gupta. I hope he's here with us in the session. Mr. Rajesh Gupta from TCPL to share his views working under industry on human rights. Mr. Rajesh?
Yeah. Very good
Thank you.
afternoon. Very good afternoon. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you are audible. Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Rajesh.
Yeah. In fact, I am very well aware of all these points, and all the my predecessor speaker has very well covered all the points. In fact, I have visited recently couple of paper industries, and I visited in almost that area where these contractor workers are working on this point. And they are not aware of the what are the hazard involved in this handling of this pulp and paper industries, and they are not. In fact, they are aware of what are the safety norms, what are the PPE are required to handling of such material, and the industries are not bothered to train them. So these are the very lacking area. They are just to perform their tasks and they complete their work. But industries and as well as the local government can do much better in this area. and which is very lacking. In fact, I have visited in the western part of industry and southern part of industry, which is the topmost paper mill of the one of the Asia biggest paper mill. But unfortunately, the scenario is not changed very much in all the paper industry. Even a very small thing like PPE, which are required to handling like masks, gloves, which are not at all using by any of the workmen. So that is a very serious thing, and they are not aware what are the compensation if anything undue happen in handling their work, and the industries are not very much keen to pursue all these things. They are not. Even very well covered, well paid off, because this work is so much tedious or so much Herculean task. So the industries are not very well. Either the government should organize these sectors and these workmen, or some paper mill industries should work together and sort out all these issues. Even hazard identification and their mitigation plans are not there. Even these are the very serious matters, and otherwise these things will be not correctly addressed. And if suppose any untoward incident like fire has happened, where they will assemble, where is the assembling point? They are not, and even the firefighting equipments are not well equipped in that area. These are the say very great concern. But the paper mills are not bother on that part. So even the management of the paper mill as well as the local government should jointly work in this, and some NGO can equally involve in this. Otherwise, this kind of work will be not properly addressed. This is my insight, and this is my personal view. In fact, I have visited recently in about 2 months back in the industry, and the scenario is same. So this is from my side, and definitely it will be help if we like Earthworm is taking the initiative on this side. So it will be definitely helpful for the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rajesh. It was really interesting to know about the difficulties and challenges. As you shared, there is a lack of awareness among the industries as well as the communities and the workers about all the benefits, how important is fire safety for them, how important is the first aids, and how important is the trainings for the workers. So thank you very much for bringing in light all these issues. So by this, we are at the end of our last session and end of this webinar. So our last session is here. I request you all to come forward and share your ideas, your queries, your feedback. So this is the open platform now. We can all have a discussion. Please bring your queries, your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for sharing multiple perspectives and points of view at this first webinar that we've put together to discuss the human rights challenges in the pulp and paper sector. My question is for Michelle and for Mr. Talim. So Michelle, you mentioned that there is always a struggle to get the suppliers to divulge the information on what are the origins of their raw material. What is your insight on why so, and how can you incentivize or leverage factories to become transparent and not look at sharing information in a threatening light or in a defensive light?
Ravini, thank you. That's a great question. And I see my partner, Robin Hopkirk, also here on the phone from a traceability perspective. So we've been working just fairly recently on the recovered paper supply chain. Maybe he can share a little bit how that is going, how our pilots has been going this year. And there's also my procurement colleague Soma and Parul here on the call, just to indicate that it's not only because we're a big company that we always have the leverage. In some instances, we only buy a very small amount from a specific pulp and paper mill where these type of high risks are happening. And so we've reached also some certain limitation of how much the industry or the different suppliers are actually able to engage or be influenced by just one single organization, even if we're a pretty big one. Maybe I'll pass it on to Robin if you can add any quick summaries of insights and challenges or opportunities we saw in the recovered fiber supply chain on the traceability side.
Thanks, Michelle. Can you hear me all right? Yes, okay. Just very quickly, yeah, it was a pilot this year. It's the first time we tried to trace back recovered fiber back to country of origin, back to collection point. Before this, recovered fiber was always considered, safe, deforestation-free as an ecological alternative to virgin fiber. And although it's still the case, it is important to have this sort of webinar to explain the risks that are associated. And so it was a pilot. We did already manage to get quite a bit of traceability back to further than just a mill, back to where the paper is actually collected, which allowed us to also have a certain percentage of traceability back to India for Nestle. And then that allows us to look at their footprint within India and what the risks are associated to this. So it was the first year we did this. I think we arrived already at a good 40% traceability, something like this after the first year. And we'll continue to push this into the next year and try to dive deeper into the issues. Yeah, that's a quick overview. I don't know if there are any specific questions. I'm happy to answer.
Hi, Robin. Rasika here. Just further to what you explained right now, I just wanted to understand what are some of these risks that you spoke about, and is there a way or is there a strategy to sort of tackle them already since they have now been identified?
So the risks I'm talking about are all the ones that were explained in this webinar related to social issues, especially workers' rights and child labor or others that were expressed. So how to tackle these, I think this is kind of what we're working on, typically with the team here led by Bini and with other projects that Michelle showed in Mexico and in Brazil. I think it's very dependent on the country where the country of origin of the fiber, because there are different contexts. And for example, in Brazil, we're working with a social enterprise. So we're working with another NGO on site, which is working with cooperatives that collect the fiber and helping them have a better access to market, helping them to address some social rights issues within their supply chains, etc. And then in India, of course, we just heard about what's going on. It's about raising awareness. It's about having the industry be involved into the risk mitigation processes, into putting in maybe some income like Nestle is doing into the actually addressing these risks and working with the companies at the base of the supply chain.
Got it. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Rashika, just to complement on that, obviously for Nestle, we do have a responsible sourcing standard. And so one of the key things is figuring out and ensuring that all of our suppliers are following this. And so that's where this traceability piece comes in and is really critical. So figuring out with the different suppliers that we are aware of, where we don't know, we need to improve that visibility. And where we do know, understand what are the individual or different risks that we are seeing on the ground and checking with them on how they are approaching these topics. So that would be kind of the initial first steps. And when we do find risks, overall, Nestle's philosophy is working with our suppliers to make them better and improve overall. So that's very aligned on why we are working closely with Earthworm, because we have that kind of similar value system to approach these type of problems. But obviously, if at one point things can't work out, it does need, in some instances, to come to the decision to take them out of the supply chain. But again, there's different elements to this, and we do also need to consider how we are sourcing, where we can source our paper from and how we cover the volumes that we need overall that allow us to prioritize and see where we can and have to engage most immediately.
I have a question for Mr. Talim Hassan. Since you have talked about your experience working in paper mills, and this is the third paper mill you're working at, Mr. Talim, what in your opinion or in your experience is a low-hanging fruit for organizations like Nestle, for organizations like us, that we need to address immediately, and you think we can possibly look at solutions for, and if you have any solutions or ideas or discussions that you have had within the factory, it would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, actually, the main issue with the paper mills is that people are not really interested into looking into the basic things about the welfare of the workers. Like some paper industries have unions, like all the plants which have worker unions, they make sure that their workers are properly fed and look after. But other plants do not allow to have worker unions in their plants. So we we have to allow the plants to have worker unions so that at least they can uh, take care of the workers. If not the government, worker unions can handle these things. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you, Mr. Talim. That echoes Mr. Sudhir Katiar's points of view as well on the subject. So really great to hear that from someone from the industry as well.
Yeah, means I'm Sanket, and I have a question for Mr. Rajesh Talim ji and means, actually both of them. So, we are discussing about the workers, and when it comes to whenever we will visit, carry out any visit to any pulp and paper factory, we came to know that workers are not that much aware. So when they are not aware, maybe we will have to aware that that can be one of the priority areas. Apart from this, do you think that worker has got some grievances, and those grievances should be shared with the management or the brands or wherever it may be? So do you think such type of grievances are there inside the industry that you are working, and what type of measures have been taken care inside that particular area? So it's question for both of you, Rajeshji, since you have uh, been there in the industry so long, and Talimji also.
In fact, from my side, I'm Rajesh Gupta. From my side, I have a suggestion to handling such kind of workers in the industries. There must be a addressal system of their grievances, and it should be all these workers must be properly recorded. Are they are working in a designated hours like 8 hours or 12 hours? Some of the time the workers are working more than 16 hours in a day, and they are not enough food taking to handling such a type of Herculean task, or where the environment is not so good. So there must be a proper, say, a addressal system within the factory, and it should be reported to the same way, either on the factory inspector level or some big dignitaries who can handle the properly address the issue. Otherwise, management will not solve this problem immediately. Like PPE, PPE is a very small thing, which is a disciplinary as well as their awareness. They are not even aware of the PPE how to handle. They are not aware that gloves are how much importance for their work. They are not understand how this mask is important, how to handle the situation when the untoward incident happen. They are not properly trained. Are their training has been given properly? Are they are enough trained? Are they are aware of all the situation. They are not even aware of all the situation. And the worker, how are the worker old in the that area? Sometimes the workers are in a routine. Say, single workers has come, another day another workers come. So they are not aware of all these things. So these are very important thing and must be addressed in a proper level, be the proper SOP on that part, which is lacking on that part. Proper SOP which will be properly addressed by the either the factory inspector or top management, or it should be review on a at least weekly basis or a monthly fortnightly basis. That will be correct resolve of this issue from my side. Okay.
Thank you, Rajiji.
Hello. See,
Hello.
there are SOPs and there are all kind of norms and all those things. Like, but the companies, they do not follow them. I mean, people like the workers are getting such a meager amount of money for doing their work. So like it's really tough for them to come up with their problems and all that. So there should be some kind of ground level checking kind of thing. Government should intervene in these, like find out the plants which are like working in these tough conditions, and they have to zero out the those plants which do not obey these laws. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Talimji, for that. So, so do you think if there is a mechanism where the workers can say something through that particular mechanism, maybe we can say they can raise their voice, not only by putting the cheats inside the suggestion box for the management, may it be possible, do you think, as far as the supervisors are concerned? There are some supervisors, those who really take part into the health and safety of the workers. So do you think would it work if there is some mechanism to address that?
I think we may have lost Mr. Talim
Yes.
for a minute. I have a question for Shoma from Nestle India. In your opinion, Shoma, working with Nestle India, like what are some of the key elements with which factories can be motivated to prioritize certain key elements of worker well-being that are easily addressed than some harder ones which require more investment and time? So what are the ways, in your opinion, that factories can be more motivated towards working on worker rights?
Hi, Vinny. Yeah, so in line with the guidelines of Nestle, so we emphasize a lot on the responsible sourcing guidelines, right? So which is based on the SMETA audit norms, and there the social responsibility of each and every company with whom we are associated with has a huge significance. In fact, it is a mandatory requirement for all of our major suppliers to adhere as per the guideline of responsible sourcing. So in that case, if you go through the points which are covered under responsible sourcing, whether there is a huge, a screening of the employees, and even their registers and etc. are checked whether there is any overtime, or whether they are abided to work for an extended hours without compensation and all. And from the company's point of view, we take it very strictly, as it is actually a part of the company's KPI as well. So and there is also a strict no from the child labor aspect as well. So from Nestle, this entire view of the humanitarian ground as well as the social security of each and every employee of our business associates, as well as our factories, so it goes without any saying, is of huge importance, and we do get abided by our guidelines. I hope I have answered that. In case of any further query, happy to answer.
Yeah, absolutely, Shoma. Our experience when we meet the factory, let's say HR heads or plant heads is that, look, it's well and good that you're wanting to do this. It's just that we are dealing with shortage of raw material. There is lack of power supply. We don't have enough workers. We don't have enough water. Like, there are far too many priorities that we are struggling with, and this industry is informal. That this, while it is an important issue, at this point in our juncture, we cannot prioritize. This is the answer that comes when we are talking to the factories, which is fair from where the factory owners or the management is coming from. So I think it's definitely something that there is a middle ground that needs to be hit, which is, I think that's the sweet spot we're all trying to work towards. But thank you for your insights.
I have a question for this group, or maybe if Mr. Sudhir is still here. I'm just curious, we've heard a few times now also the local government, the importance of engaging the local government. I think, one of the things that we've seen is, yes, Nestle is one of the big companies there, but how do we have potentially others asking for the same things that are kind of in line or indicating kind of the same priorities that need to be focused on? I don't know if anyone can comment on kind of where, how and where in a topic like this can and should a government support and step in versus collaborate in something that can kind of bring these different organizations together with the same voice. I don't know how complex that is in the India context, so just curious to understand that better.
I think I can quickly touch upon what I think you're trying to ask, Michelle. So we mainly work with government, since we work on welfare schemes and ensuring that the all kinds of informal workers and all kinds of marginalized citizens are linked to welfare schemes. So government liaising is a key part of our process. So from our experience, I think the government is more than happy to sort of reach out to these workers with the welfare schemes. What is lacking is a mobilization factor, where companies like Nestle or other players in the ecosystem take an initiative to mobilize these workers and sort of give them a platform, give the government a platform to come and conduct awareness sessions, or conduct mass drives for enrolling the citizens in government welfare schemes and ensuring that they have the correct documentation. So I think that's a great approach to have, that where is it that we can collaborate with the government. But I think uh, in India, the government is more of a responder than a proactive sort of player. So now that we're thinking on these lines, we can, as a group, in fact, go to the government and ask them for their support, which I think they'll be more than happy to give.
I agree definitely with what Rasika is saying, especially the fact that the Indian government is more responsive than proactive. That also, and besides that, going back to what Mr. Talim had talked about, that certain factories allow unionization and others don't. And where there are factory unions or labor unions, the workers' rights and well-being are better taken care of. That is something that has been the labor rights movement and unions in India linked to the national or state level political parties have a lot of power. They have a skin in the game, and therefore, like, they understand their issues and are able to present that to the management. But there's also the flip side of that. There is a fear of workers' unions from the point of view of the businesses. So uh, when we're looking at it from the point of view of what are the Indian government's or the regulatory ways in which such checks can be put into the system to ensure the people in the supply chain are well protected, taken care of, I think definitely there is room for improvement in terms of the government response, more proactive regulations and the implementation of those regulations, more proactive policy level discussions, policy gap addressal is certainly required. And I think there is definitely, in a platform like this, a voice representing the government would have definitely shed a lot as well. So maybe in the next roundtable, that is something that we will be looking at bringing to the fore, because that's an important perspective. Like, while businesses have a role to play, so do regulatory bodies like governments and civil society, and of course the workers themselves. So it is, like Rasika said, it has to be an ecosystem approach. So we have to address all players in the ecosystem and get all of them involved so that it works like a oiled machinery.
So I hope no further queries. So I think we have come to an end of very interactive session. I would like to thank you, all of you, for being here and share your views, your feedbacks, and actively participating in this webinar. We hope we will be arranging such webinars, such meetings in future also, and we will invite you all where we want to come together on a platform with all the stakeholders, industry, supply chains, to create an environment of trust, transparency, responsibility, and collaborativeness. So we will be sharing with you soon the recording of this webinar and other references we have. So thank you once again for all of you for joining today's webinar. Have a great evening ahead.